The alien princess married a quiet human. Part 1. The arrangement. The morning was cold and gray when Cole Hardin arrived at the Federation's orbital transit hub. He stood at a wide glass window and watched the stars outside. A large Loon diplomatic vessel was docking slowly at the far end of the port. It moved like a ship that knew it was being watched. Long, silver, and very quiet. Cole held a small thermos of coffee in both hands. He had not slept much the night before, but his face showed nothing. He looked calm. He always looked calm. A young Federation aide named Peter came rushing over with a data pad, ready to explain Loon customs, greetings, and the correct way to bow before a royal. Cole let the boy speak for about 30 seconds. Then he said 2 words. "I know." Peter stopped talking. He looked at Cole. Cole was still watching the ship. Outside, Peter quietly put the data pad back under his arm and stood there, not sure what to do with himself. Cole was not a tall man. He was not especially wide or muscular. He wore plain civilian clothes, dark trousers, a gray jacket, simple boots. There was nothing about him that said important or dangerous. That was, of course, the point. The Loon delegation came down the boarding ramp 20 minutes later. 4 guards in silver armor walked first. Then came 2 advisors in long robes. And then behind them came Princess Sarava via Loon. She was tall for a Loon, which already made her taller than most humans in the room. Her skin was the pale blue-white of deep ocean water, and her eyes were dark amber that caught the light like polished stone. She wore her hair pulled back tightly, and her expression was one that said she was used to walking into rooms full of people who wanted things from her. She looked around the transit hall. Slowly, her eyes moved from the guards near the door to the banners of the Federation, hanging from the ceiling to the rows of officials who had come to greet her. And then her eyes landed on Cole. He had not moved from the window. He was still holding his thermos. He gave her a small nod. She had been told the human representative was a retired engineer. She had not expected much. Looking at him now, she still did not expect much. He looked ordinary, quiet, a little tired maybe. She turned away and greeted the Federation Council members who came forward to welcome her. The wedding ceremony happened 3 days later. It was held in a large hall on the station, decorated with both Federation blue and Loon silver. There were speeches. There were long formal readings. Sarava stood very straight through all of it, her expression composed and dignified. Cole stood beside her and did exactly what was required of him. He said the right words at the right moments. He did not fidget. He did not look bored. He was simply present. When it came time for the exchange of rings, Cole placed the ceremonial Federation band on her finger first. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and brought out a second ring. It was small and plain, made of dark iron, worn smooth with age. It was not beautiful in any formal sense. It was just old. Sarava looked at it. Then she looked at him. "It was my grandmother's," he said quietly. "She wore it every day for 50 years. I thought if you wanted, you could have it too." Sarava said nothing. She let him slide it onto her finger, next to the other one. Something about the plainness of it, the simple honesty of an old ring that had belonged to a real person, touched a place inside her that the ceremony had not. The reception dinner that followed was long and formal. Dozens of Loon nobles and Federation officials moved through the hall. Food was served in many courses. Music played softly in the background. Cole sat beside Sarava and said little. He ate slowly and watched the room with eyes that missed nothing. Late in the evening, a Loon noble named Lord Vethais came to their table. He was the kind of man who said unpleasant things with a smile on his face. He made a comment about humans, something about how young the species was, how small their history was, how much they still had to learn. He said it sweetly, like a compliment, twisted just slightly out of shape. Sarava kept her expression still. She was used to this from Vethais. But then Cole looked at the man. He did not raise his voice. He did not stand up. He simply leaned slightly forward and said something to Vethais in a very low tone. Sarava could not hear what it was. Nobody at the table could. It lasted only a few seconds. Lord Vethais' smile disappeared. The color left his face the way water drains from a cup. He excused himself politely. He did not come back to the table for the rest of the night. In fact, Sarava noticed that he seemed to avoid their entire side of the hall. She looked at Cole. He had already turned back to his food. He picked up his fork and resumed eating, as if nothing had happened. That night, when the guests were gone and the hall was being cleaned, Sarava went to her private room and sent a message to her most trusted intelligence officer, Captain Deveros. She kept the message short. Pull everything you can find on a human named Cole Hardin, retired Federation engineer. Send me whatever you find. She set the pad down and changed out of her formal clothes and sat on the edge of the bed. She looked at the iron ring on her finger. It was heavy in a way that the ceremonial one was not. Real weight from a real life. 6 hours later, Devaris sent his reply. It was very short. Much shorter than she expected. File not found. Classification level above Imperial. Access. Sarava read those words 3 times. Then she set the pad on the table and stared at the wall for a long time. Outside her window, the stars were still and silent. Somewhere down the corridor she could hear the faint sound of a man making coffee in the small shared kitchen of their new quarters. She thought about the noble who had gone pale. She thought about the 2 words Cole had said to the aide that morning, I know. She thought about the ring that had belonged to his grandmother. The file did not exist. The classification was above Imperial. Access. And her husband was making coffee like a man without a single secret in the world. Sarava Valon, 4th princess of the Loon Empire, had the quiet and unsettling feeling that she had just made the most interesting decision of her life. The alien princess married a quiet human. Part 2, The Life Between Wars. Meridian Cross was a large station built in the space between 3 territories, belonging fully to none of them. It was neutral ground, which was why the Federation had chosen it as the couple's diplomatic residence. There was a broad promenade on the lower level full of shops and food stalls run by a dozen different species. Above that were meeting halls and offices, and at the very top, behind a wall of curved glass, was a small observation garden where someone had managed to grow real plants despite being far from any sun. Cole Hardin found the garden on his second day at Meridian Cross. By the end of the first week, he was there every morning. Sarava watched him go up each day with a watering can and a small pair of clippers, and she said nothing about it. She had her own work to do, meetings with station officials, messages from the Loon Court, diplomatic requests that arrived in batches and needed careful answers. She was good at her work. She had been doing it since she was 16 years old. But in the quiet moments between tasks, she found herself thinking about the man she had married, not in a sentimental way, in the way a person thinks about a lock they cannot find the key to. She began to notice things, small things. On a Tuesday, she passed Cole in the lower promenade as he was buying bread from a small stall run by an old Darren woman. The woman's hands were slow with age, and she kept apologizing for taking too long. Cole told her there was no rush. He waited with the same patience he gave to Senate meetings. When the woman finally handed him the bread, she smiled like he had given her something instead of the other way around. On a Thursday, Sarava was walking back from a late meeting and passed through the corridor near the maintenance wing. A Kreth enforcer was coming the other way, large armored, the kind of creature that most station residents stepped aside for without thinking. The Kreth saw Cole walking ahead of Sarava and stopped. He placed one fist against his chest. It was a gesture of respect in Kreth culture, one typically reserved for military equals. Cole returned the gesture without breaking stride. Sarava stopped walking entirely. The Kreth moved on. Cole did not look back. She said nothing that evening, but she added it to the list she was building in her head. Then came the matter of the cargo ship. A human Federation vessel called the Doral Sun had been seized by a friend group calling themselves the Veth Collective's Red Branch. They were holding 11 crew members somewhere in open space and demanding political recognition. The Federation's official response was slow and careful. Committees were formed, statements were prepared. Negotiators were selected and briefed. Cole read the initial report at breakfast. Sarava watched him read it. His expression did not change. He finished his food, folded the report, set it on the corner of the table, and excused himself to take a walk. He was gone for about 40 minutes. Sarava thought nothing of it. She left for her own meetings. 48 hours later, the 11 crew members of the Doral Sun were returned unharmed to a Federation pickup point. The Red Branch's 4 senior leaders had simultaneously been handed over to their respective home governments by parties unknown. The fringe group had, as One News Service put it, simply stopped existing. Overnight, no shots had been fired. No ransom had been paid. No official operation had been logged. Sarava read the report in her office. Then she sat very still for a moment. Then she went to find Cole. He was in the kitchen. There was a young loon attendant named Ben who worked the station's kitchens and had recently started hovering near their quarters during his off hours, clearly wanting to learn something but too shy to ask. Cole had noticed that afternoon he was showing the boy how to make something he called chicken and dumplings, a soft, warm human dish that smelled like a home Sarava had never been to. The boy was laughing at something Cole had said. Cole was not quite smiling, but his face had softened in a way Sarava had not seen before. His hands moved slowly through the steps, patient showing rather than telling. Sarava stood in the doorway and watched. She stayed for 2 full minutes. Then she walked away without saying anything. That evening she made herself sit down across from Cole at the small table. Their quarters. She set her hands flat on the table and looked at him. I know something is wrong with your file, she said. Not wrong in the sense of a mistake. Wrong in the sense that there is no file. My intelligence officer has clearance that goes above most heads of state. He found nothing. Not a redacted file. Not a restricted file. Nothing. Cole was quiet. I'm not afraid of what you are, she said. But I will not live in my own home without knowing who I am living with. Cole looked at her for a long moment. He had the kind of eyes that did not give much away, but Sarava had learned to watch the small things, the way he breathed, the stillness of his hands. Have you ever heard of the Titan offensive? He asked. She had. Everyone had. It was taught in galactic military history as the most precise and devastating campaign ever carried out by a human force. 12 weeks, 3 contested star systems, and a complete restructuring of the border situation that had destabilized that region for decades. The commander who planned it had never been publicly named. Some thought it was a team. Some thought it was a myth built around a committee of generals. Sarava looked at the men across the table. The men with the plain iron ring. The men who made chicken and dumplings for a shy kitchen boy and waited patiently for an old woman's slow hands. He did not say anything else. He did not need to. She went to bed that night without speaking further. She lay in the dark for a long time. She thought about the noble who had gone pale at the reception, the Kreth who had given a soldier's salute in a corridor, the ship crew who had come home without a single shot fired. She had thought she was living beside a quiet man, a safe man, a forgettable man. She understood now that she had been standing next to the edge of something very deep and had simply not looked down. The alien princess married a quiet human. Part 3: Old Ghosts, New Storms. The Iron Circle was not a large group. It did not need to be. It had money, old connections, and a deep belief that the Loon Empire had made a terrible mistake by signing a peace accord with humanity. In their view, humans were young, unpredictable, and far too eager. And the fact that a loon princess had now married one of them was not a symbol of goodwill. It was a symbol of weakness. They had been planning quietly for several months. They were patient in the way that old, powerful people tend to be patient. They did not rush. They moved one piece at a time. Cole knew they existed before Sarava did. He had been watching for them since before the wedding. He said nothing to her about it until a woman named April Ward arrived at Meridian Cross. April was not tall, and she did not look like what she was. She had short brown hair, a calm face, and the kind of posture that came from years of training kept hidden under years of pretending to be ordinary. She was listed on the station manifest as a Federation cultural liaison. In practice, she was something quite different. She and Cole met in a small room off the promenade and talked for just over an hour. Sarava did not know what was said. When Cole came back to their quarters that evening, he set his jacket on the chair and looked at Sarava in a way that was direct and clear. "Something is coming," he said. "I don't have details yet. But for the next 2 weeks, I need you to stay within 2 steps of your personal guard at all times. Not most of the time. All of the time." Sareva looked at him. "What kind of something?" "The kind that prefers a soft target." She did not argue. She nodded once and went back to the report she had been reading. She added a message to her guard captain. That same night, the Iron Circle moved sooner than Cole had expected. It happened on a Wednesday morning. Sareva had a public walkthrough of the station's market district, a routine goodwill event designed to show that the Loon-Human alliance was stable and comfortable. She walked with her guard, 2 Federation officials, and Cole 3 steps behind her on her right. The market was busy. Vendors called out, species of every kind moved through the narrow lanes. Children ran between the stalls. The shot came from a roof access point, above a food stall on the east side. The assassin had one clear moment. He took it. But Cole was already moving before the sound reached the crowd. What happened next lasted about 4 seconds. Sareva felt a rush of air as Cole passed her on the right. She turned in time to see him cross 8 of crowded Market Lane at a speed that was very wrong for a retired engineer. The assassin had been bringing the weapon up for a second shot when Cole reached him. There was no dramatic struggle, no drawn-out fight. Cole disarmed the man with 2 precise movements, turned him against the wall, and had both his arms locked behind him. Before the first person in the crowd had fully understood what was happening, Cole handed the man to the 2 nearest station security officers. Then he straightened his jacket. Then he turned around, walked back to Sareva, and offered her his arm. "Shall we continue?" he said. Sareva took his arm. They continued. She did not speak of it until later. What could she have said standing in the middle of a market lane with 100 eyes watching? The aftermath was loud. The Galactic Council convened emergency sessions. 3 faction leaders called for the suspension of the accord. 2 Loon nobles from the conservative wing released public statements suggesting the alliance had made the Empire a target. It was exactly what the Iron Circle had hoped for, not the failed assassination, but the noise and fear that followed it. Sareva requested time before the full council. She got it. She stood in the council chamber, straight-backed, and spoke clearly and without raised emotion. She said that the attack had failed. She said that the accord would not be suspended because frightened people had decided fear was easier than progress. She said that she had made her choice freely and that she stood by it. Cole was not in the chamber. He watched through a small monitor in a side room. When Sareva finished and the council gave a cautious but respectful response, he said only, "That was well done." It was, Sareva reflected later, the most direct compliment he had given her in weeks. She found that she was glad for it. 3 days after the assassination attempt, Cole received a message from a man named Derek Lynn. Derek had served under Cole during the offensive, rising to major before leaving the service to work as an independent contractor. The message was short. It said, "They're waking up the vault." Cole read it once. Then he deleted it. Then he went up to the observation garden and sat on the bench between the tall fern plants and looked out at the stars. Sareva found him there an hour later. She had a cup of tea in each hand. She sat down across from him and held one out. He took it. She did not ask what was wrong. She could see that something was. She simply sat there in the quiet and waited. After a while, Cole said, "I spent 11 years being responsible for people's lives. Thousands of them. Every plan I made, every order I gave. If I was wrong, people died. And I was not always right." Sarava held her cup and listened. "The weight of it does not go away," he said. "You carry it. You get used to the weight. But it does not go away." She said nothing. She did not offer a solution or a comfort. She simply stayed. They sat together in the garden for a long time after that. The next morning, Cole came down from the garden, found April Ward in the small side office she had been using, and set his coffee on the desk. "Get me a secure line to Meridian." "Command," he said. April looked up. "It's time to go back to work," he said. The alien princess married a quiet human. Part 4: The Warlord at Peace. The Iron Circle had believed, as many groups like them do, that they were operating without being seen. They had moved carefully. They had used coded language and secondary channels and trusted only their own people. They believed that because no alarm had been raised, no alarm had been noticed. They were wrong. Cole Hardin did not go to a warship. He did not request troops or military support or an official operation number. He went to a small office on Meridian Cross, the same side room April Ward had been using, and he sat down in front of 3 screens with a cold cup of coffee. And he began to work. What followed over the next 9 days was not dramatic to watch. There were no battles. There were no speeches. There were a great number of very quiet messages sent and received, a great deal of information organized and redirected, and a series of events in different parts of the galaxy that, taken one by one, looked like unrelated coincidences. A supply ship carrying materials to an Iron Circle operation in the outer belt was stopped by a routine inspection. The inspectors found things they were not supposed to find. A communications relay that the Iron Circle had been using for 2 years was suddenly unable to send or receive. Engineers examined it and found nothing wrong with the hardware. The problem was never explained. 4 Iron Circle operatives received anonymous messages from their own governments containing information that only internal intelligence services could have gathered. All 4 were quietly detained within 24 hours. A funding account used by the Iron Circle to pay contractors was flagged by 3 separate financial monitoring agencies on the same morning. The money stopped moving. The Iron Circle did not understand what was happening. They could see that things were going wrong, but they could not see from which direction the damage was coming. It was like trying to stop a flood when you could not find where the water was entering. April Ward sat beside Cole through most of it. She knew what she was watching. She had seen it once before during the Titan offensive when she had been a young lieutenant trying to understand why things kept going right when every model said they should be going wrong. She understood now. Cole did not fight a war the way other people fought wars. He fought it by taking away the enemy's ability to fight at all. On the 6th day, Loon Admiral Vethurak arrived at Meridian Cross. Vethurak was a serious man with a long record of service, and a deep suspicion of humanity that he wore the way other men wore medals. He had heard that humans were coordinating some kind of response to the Iron Circle's operation. He wanted to know who was in charge. He expected to meet a fleet admiral, perhaps a council security director, someone with a title that matched the scale of what was happening. He was taken to the small side office. Cole was reading a report when Vethirak came in. He looked up, set the report down, and gestured to the chair across from him. "Admiral," he said, "would you like some coffee?" Vethirak stared. He looked at the 3 screens. He looked at the cold cup beside the keyboard. He looked at the man in the plain gray shirt. Then he sat down. They talked for 3 hours. Sarava learned this later from April, who had been quietly present in the corner. She said that Vethirak had arrived, looking for someone to challenge, and had left looking like a man who had learned a new language in an afternoon and was still trying to process it. On the 8th day, the Iron Circle's remaining leadership sent a formal communication to Meridian Cross. It was addressed to the human warlord. Their words, not anyone else's. They offered to enter into negotiations. They listed things they were willing to give up in exchange for a managed withdrawal from their current situation. Cole read it at the breakfast table. Sarava was across from him eating. She watched him read. He folded it, handed it to April, and said, "Forward that to the Galactic Council's arbitration office." April took it without a word. Sarava put down her fork. "You're not going to respond." "They'll get a response," Cole said. "From the right people through the right channels." He picked up his coffee. "They wanted to speak to a warlord. They'll speak to the council instead." On the 9th day, it was over. The Iron Circle was formally dissolved by order of 3 separate governments, whose intelligence services had, in the span of 1 week, received everything they needed to act. Key members were in custody. The operations were shut down. The funding was frozen. The weapons cache, the vault that Derek's message had warned about, collection of old Federation hardware that Cole himself had once designed as a contingency, was quietly located and secured by a joint team that received its coordinates from an unregistered source. The accord held. The station returned to normal. A council representative named Han visited Sarava in her office 2 days later. Han was careful and intelligent and had served on the council for 20 years. She sat down, folded her hands, and looked at Sarava with a very specific expression, the kind that meant she was about to say something uncomfortable. "Your husband," Han said slowly, "may be the most dangerous political intelligence in the known galaxy. I mean that in the most clinical sense possible." Sarava waited. "The council wants to know," Han continued, "what your position is, and how much of this you were aware of before it happened." Sarava looked at her calmly. "What would you like me to do with that question?" Han had no answer. She left shortly after. That evening, when the station had gone quiet, Sarava and Cole sat in their quarters. She looked at him across the small table. "Why did you never tell me?" she asked. "The real reason." He was quiet for a long time. Not the quiet of someone avoiding a question. The quiet of someone deciding to be honest. "I was not sure you would stay," he said. Sarava looked at him. She looked at the iron ring on her Finger the old one, the plain one, the one that had belonged to a woman she never met. The night after the wedding, she said. Quietly, I sat on my bed and I held this ring. And I thought, this is the first real thing anyone has given me in a diplomatic arrangement. Not a gesture. Not a symbol. Something real. She paused. I made my decision then. Cole said nothing. But something in his face changed, very slightly, in the way that a locked thing changes when it finally opens. The alien princess married a quiet human. Part 5. What remains? The galaxy adjusted slowly, the way it always does after something large and unexpected happens. There were reports written and committees formed. There were long discussions in council chambers about what exactly had occurred, and who was responsible and what it meant going forward. There were opinion pieces and diplomatic analyses and a great number of conversations that started with the question, did anyone know? The answer mostly was no. Cole Horton had spent a long time being someone that no one knew. It was a habit he had built carefully over many years, and it did not disappear just because the Iron Circle had addressed a message to the human warlord. The name was out now, quietly among the people who needed to know, but Cole himself continued to live the way he always had. He made coffee. He went to the garden. He read in the evenings. Sarava noticed that people looked at him differently now when they passed him in the corridors. Station staff who had always been friendly now had something extra. Their expressions, something careful, like they were aware of standing near something that could be dangerous but was choosing not to be. Even some of the senior officials who had once quietly underestimated him now kept a slightly greater distance. Cole did not appear to notice. Or perhaps he noticed and did not care. With him, it was often hard to tell the difference. April Ward received her promotion 6 weeks after the Iron Circle was dissolved. She was named Director of Federation Intelligence Operations, which was one of the most significant appointments the Federation had made in a decade. The ceremony was held in a formal hall on Meridian Cross, attended by council members and senior staff from a dozen different agencies. April gave a short speech. She thanked the council. She thanked her team. And then she said something that made a number of people in the room glance at each other. She said, I had a mentor who taught me that the most important thing about power is what you choose not to do with it. Power used quietly leaves no wreckage. Power used carefully leaves room for something better to grow in the space where the wreckage would have been. She did not say Cole's name. She did not need to. Cole was standing at the back of the room. Sarava was beside him. She watched his face as April spoke. Nothing changed in his expression. He stood straight, hands at his sides, and listened to a woman who had once been a young lieutenant trying to understand why things kept going right. Describe what she had learned from watching him work. Sarava thought that was probably the closest thing to pride she had ever seen him hold without showing it. The Galactic Council debated humanity's formal status for several weeks. The question of whether to elevate the human seat to a permanent security position was not simple. There were those who supported it because of what they had seen. There were those who opposed it because of the same reason. It was, in the end, the kind of question that comes down to what people are more afraid of the known thing or the unknown. At one point, a council member asked Cole directly for his opinion. He said, "I hope you make the decision based on what is right for the galaxy, and not on what you are afraid of." The motion passed. Derek Lynn came to visit on a Thursday. He was not a quiet man. He arrived at the station in a loud jacket carrying a bottle of something he claimed was the finest thing produced in the outer systems, and immediately made himself at home in their kitchen. He told Sarava 3 jokes before she had fully registered who he was. 2 of them were not very good. She laughed at all 3, which surprised her. They had dinner together, the 3 of them, around the small table in the quarters that had slowly, over months, begun to feel like somewhere people actually lived. Derek talked a great deal. He told stories from the old days, carefully edited ones, Sarava noticed, the kind that were funny without being classified. He made Cole laugh once, a real laugh, quiet and brief, at something about a supply transport and a miscommunication about livestock. Sarava watched the of them. She watched the ease between them, the particular ease of people who have been through something hard together and come out the other side. Derek looked at Cole the way soldiers look at a commander they would follow, again without being asked, not out of fear, not even out of loyalty exactly, out of the specific trust of a person who has put their life in someone else's hands and had it returned to them intact. She understood something then that no file and no report could have told her. Cole was not what he was because of some cold calculation or tactical genius, working in isolation. He was what he was because people had trusted him with their lives, and he had taken that seriously every single time. For 11 years. The weight he had described in the garden, he had earned every bit of it. Honestly, Sarava's older sister, Princess Dara, came to Meridian Cross on an official visit the following month. On the second evening, she pulled Sarava aside into a quiet alcove near the east wing and looked at her with the direct concern of an older sibling who had been worrying for a long time. "Are you safe?" Dara asked. Plain and simple. Sarava considered the question. She thought about a market lane and a man who had crossed 8M in 4 seconds. She thought about 9 days and 3 screens and a cold cup of coffee. She thought about an iron ring on a woman's finger for 50 years. "I am the safest person in the galaxy," Sarava said. Dara stared at her. "That is either very reassuring or very alarming." "Yes," Sarava agreed. "Probably both." On a quiet evening near the end of the month, Sarava brought 2 cups of tea up to the observation garden. Cole was there, as he almost always was. In the evenings now, moving slowly between the plants with a small spray bottle, checking the soil, trimming a leaf here and there. The stars outside the curved glass were still and bright. She sat down on the bench and held 1 cup out. He took it and sat across from her. They were quiet for a while. It was the kind of quiet that had once felt strange between them and now felt like something they had built together, like a room of their own. Then Sarava asked, "What do you think about when you come up here?" Cole considered the question the way he considered most things, seriously, without hurrying. "Quiet," he said. She nodded. She looked out at the stars. "I used to find silence uncomfortable," she said. "I always wanted to fill it with something. Work." Talking. Plans. I thought silence meant something was wrong. What changed? He asked. She looked at him. I learned what the silence was built on, she said. A small moment passed between them. Cole reached across the space between their chairs and took her hand. He held it the way a person holds something they are glad to have found. Not tightly, not with any show of it. Simply with the steady certainty of someone who has made a decision and has no intention of changing it. They sat like that for a long time while the stars moved slowly past the glass. On the table between them, when Sarava finally set down her cup, the plain iron ring caught the light, old and worn, smooth, sitting next to the loon. Ceremonial band, both of them real, both of them as to have offered and Hurst to have kept. Two different worlds, two different weights. Outside, the galaxy continued to be large and complicated and never entirely at peace. There were always new problems forming. At the edges, there were always old fears finding new shapes. But here, in a small garden on a station, between stars, something had grown that neither of them had been looking for. Something that did not need a war to defend it. Something that had come quietly, the way the best things do, and had decided to stay.